You are listening to the Live Well with Arthritis podcast, helping you to live a healthier and happier life with your arthritis. Every episode contains science-backed support, expert advice, and a deep understanding of the reality of living with arthritis. I'm your host, Emily Johnson, also known as Arthritis Foodie. I'm a best-selling author and the founder of Live Well with Arthritis. Whether you've been living with arthritis for years, or you're navigating a new diagnosis, or perhaps you have symptoms and are looking for answers, this podcast is for you. For more support, you can join the waitlist for my course, Live Well with Arthritis, on www.livewellwitharthritis.com/waitlist. That's www.livewellwitharthritis.com/waitlist. Places are limited, so the earlier you sign up, the better. Now, let's get into the episode. I am thrilled to welcome VJ Hamilton to the show. VJ is a registered nutritionist and she's an expert in autoimmune disease. She combines her background in biochemistry and immunology with nutritional therapy in order to give her clients personalised, science-backed support. VJ runs the Autoimmunity Nutritionist, both virtually and in person. And she specialises in gut, skin and joint health, helping people to feel their best through practical and evidence-based nutrition and functional medicine approaches. Hello and welcome to the podcast, VJ. It's so lovely to have you on here. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me, Emily. I'm excited to be on your podcast today.
Oh, brilliant. It's wonderful to have you here. And I'm sure many listeners have heard of you already, or hopefully have heard of you already, as we've worked with each other many times over the years. So yeah, I would love to chat through your journey with autoimmune diseases and your experience as a nutritionist and how it all led to your career today, because I just think it's so relatable, especially to our listeners who I'm sure will be able to have their own stories.
Yeah, exactly. And it is all about your story, which is why I share mine quite often, because I first got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when I was 7 years old, which is quite young. And I actually ended up working with a lot of children in my clinic as a result of that. But yeah, my parents discovered a small patch of hair loss when I was 7 years old, and that later got diagnosed as alopecia areata. And I suppose at the time, I didn't really think about it being an autoimmune condition until I then developed psoriasis as a teenager. And there was some family members who also had different types of autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's and sarcoidosis. So I knew I was starting to understand that this was affecting me and family members. And I always loved English at school, to be honest. And then in my A-levels, I decided to do all science A-levels and went to university and studied immunology, and I did my dissertation on autoimmune disease with the autoimmune disease vasculitis. So I started learning about the science behind it and what was actually happening in my body, but I wasn't really able to put anything into practice at that point. And I was still struggling with symptoms. And actually in my A-levels, I noticed that I wasn't able to perform well in sports, and even running was difficult, and I was sleeping. So I was going home from school and sleeping for a couple of hours, which I didn't realize there was anything wrong with that. And then over my 20s, I actually ended up doing my degree, traveling and coming back and becoming an accountant. That's another story. But through that, there was lots of exams, and you go into a large accounting firm, and you're on the career ladder straight away. And so there was a lot of work involved as well, but I was really struggling with my fatigue, and I was just going home after work, sleeping on weekends. I had brain fog, anxiety. And I didn't realize that I probably had started with chronic fatigue syndrome in my teenage years. And I had a virus, which they told me at the time was a sister virus to glandular fever. I later realized was cytomegalovirus. And then I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in my early 30s and discovered nutrition and functional medicine, and thought, oh, this is how I can put my science knowledge into practice. I met an amazing nutritionist called Christine Bailey who helped me with my health initially. And then I went on to study nutrition and functional medicine and started my practice. I worked part time for a little while as an accountant while I was setting up my practice, and now do it full time and help people with arthritis and autoimmune conditions to find a natural way to manage their symptoms and hopefully reverse their symptoms, because that's where I've got to. I have been symptom free now for over 9 years. I've been talking about it a lot, and the years just keep going up. And it's just been life changing, no hair loss, no skin issues. And the main thing is no fatigue. It makes life so much easier. And that's, what I want for all my clients as well. So quite a long story. But yeah, that's where I am today.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely wonderful. Like that you've been able to reverse it in such a huge way, especially having had it at such a young age as well. And how were your parents during that time as well? It must have been quite difficult for them. And
Yeah, my parents were, quite anxious about it, and my sister really took it all on board, I would say, and she was just very upset by it all. And I think I just thought, I've always been that type of person, and I find that a lot with these conditions. It seems to affect people who internalize, and I
mm,
was just like, oh, I can soldier on and just forget about it. But yeah, it was really concerning to them, and they tried to do the best that they could. Even back then, they knew that protein was a big factor. So my mum was a nurse at the time. She started getting me to eat eggs in the morning. And if my mum wasn't there, my dad would get up before work and make me eggs. So I know it's just a little thing, but they were just trying to do whatever they could. And then when it grew back, and then it was, that was great, but then unfortunately it would go in cycles of falling
mm,
out, and I just really dealt with it on my own at that point, because the steroid cream and the other things that I would use, and we just decided not to go down that route because it was growing back. Luckily, I always thought when I lost hair it's going to grow back, and the same with the psoriasis. That came in cycles as well, so I'm quite lucky in the sense that nothing ever became really severe, but I did have a lot of symptoms that I was dealing with, other than the chronic fatigue in my early 30s.
yeah, and I think there's a tendency with these kinds of conditions to soldier on and to carry on simply because, it's just symptomatic, right? You've just got the symptoms. It's not terminal. You're not going to die from it, etc. But you do have to live with it, and it's hard, and it's really hard. So,
It is hard.
yeah, I would love to delve into the things that started to help you when you began your journey and when you started to look into nutrition. Why is nutrition so important for managing conditions like arthritis, autoimmunity, and chronic inflammation? Why is it so central?
Well, one of the reasons is because inflammation is at the heart of a lot of these conditions. So when we bring in more polyphenols and antioxidants, they can help to reduce inflammation, and they're found in vegetables and fruits. So that's part of it. But the other thing that I find in my clinic, and I think this was the case for me as well, is that I was nutrient deficient.
Mm,
And nutrients play a part in so many different biological reactions, and they're, the building blocks of our immune system as well. And when it comes to hair growth, they're extremely important, because the hair growth cycle and the hair follicle is fragile, and without those nutrients, that can be severely impacted, and that means your hair won't grow. And it's one of the first things to go when for a lot of people
mm,
when they end up with some form of health issue, whether or not they have alopecia. Um, so eating more nutrient dense foods really helped me too, and just not relying on convenient food, because I was so busy. I prioritized exercise far more over food at that point, and prioritized work over really everything.
mm,
And I did still prioritize seeing my family as well, but food was kind of quite far down the pecking order, even though in my teenage years, I really loved to cook, but I started relying on microwave meals and just looking at the coding and thinking, oh, they're all in green. It's
Mm.
going to be fine. They're low fat. So this is surely healthy for me. But I was probably deficient in fats. I was deficient in protein for sure, and I was probably deficient in some key nutrients. And when I did some testing around that time in my early 30s, I was deficient in some key B vitamins, which are again essential for energy and your immune system and lots of different bodily functions. So that's at the heart of it. And I think once somebody is able to bring down inflammation and increase the nutrients that they're deficient in, it makes a huge difference in your energy, but also in your immune function.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with that more. And it's very relatable, isn't it? When you're short on time and you see those green labels and you think, oh, yeah, everything's going to be fine. But actually, they're very poor in nutrients, aren't they? They're just, yeah, they don't really do you much good. So, yeah, I think that's definitely some things people will be able to relate to. But in terms of the nutrition, then, and, the nutrients, the polyphenols, and everything like that, it relates back, of course, to the gut and the gut microbiome. So, what has the gut got to do with arthritis? I know I speak about it in my book, and you speak about it a lot also. But that link between gut health and arthritis. What would you like to share with us about this? Because I know it's something that you wanted to chat about.
Yeah, because when I'm working with clients with arthritis, it's something that comes up time and time again. And when I see patterns in my clinic, and it can be different for different conditions when you're working with autoimmune disease, there's quite a few different areas that you need to explore. But with arthritis, I often see imbalances in the gut microbiome. I often see imbalances in the gut microbiome because it's the gut bacteria themselves that can make a big difference. So you can have, for example, low growth of certain bacteria like lactobacillus or oxalobacter, and I can talk more about those in a moment. But when they are low, they cause they can impact how well you're breaking down food. So that can affect actually how well you're digesting certain nutrients, which can lead to that nutrient deficiency that I mentioned. It can also cause inflammation because you can end up with a growth of unhelpful bacteria. I often find in people's stool test results that they have an overgrowth of certain bacteria like Klebsiella or Citrobacter or different types of bacteria that you wouldn't ordinarily find in the gut. And what can happen if there is an increased intestinal, if there's something called, you may have heard of it, of leaky gut syndrome, where you have wider gaps in the intestinal wall. And what can happen is those bacteria that are in the gut can leak into the bloodstream, and that can fire up an immune response, which can cause inflammation. So that can link to issues with the joint as well. And I don't want to get too heavy on the science, but there's something called citrullination, and this is where the joint becomes damaged, and what is happening is there's an amino acid in the joint which gets changed from arginine to citrulline, and that the immune system responds to proteins, and that protein looks different to the immune system, and as a result of that, the immune system starts to target the joint. And that citrullination has been shown to be caused by different bacteria when they get into the bloodstream, and that can be either through the gut or it can be through the gums. And there's a lot of research around rheumatoid arthritis and a bacteria that we would ordinarily have in the mouth that leaks into the bloodstream and gets into the joints and causes that damage, which then creates that inflammatory response. I mean, that I'm only naming some of the mechanisms here, but there are others as well. And it's just so interlinked. 70% of our immune system is in the gut as well. So I just find by helping somebody to improve their gut microbiome, help with the gut barrier function, strengthening that, and helping them digest foods properly, it can make such a difference when it comes to arthritis.
Yeah, massively. And there's more and more research coming out as well about the gut microbiome and arthritis. Even Versus Arthritis are doing studies on it as well. So, it we're kind of at the very beginning almost of it, but that was absolutely fascinating about the citronization. That's, yeah, incredible. And what about the oxalates that you mentioned as well? What are oxalates, and how do these also contribute to joint health issues?
Yeah, so when it comes to oxalates, that oxalobacter bacteria that I mentioned that can be lacking in people's guts can help you break down oxalates. And oxalates are natural compounds which are found in some healthy foods. And I suppose that's the thing, they're found in spinach and certain nuts and sweet potato. But if that bacteria is missing, that helps you break down oxalates. So it means that you're not able to break down those compounds as well. I mean, your body is able to break them down as well, but our gut bacteria actually help us with digestion. And what can happen if you have, say, an increased intestinal lining plus you haven't broken down oxalates, what they can do is they can get into the bloodstream and they bind with calcium in the bloodstream and create a crystal. And that crystal can end up getting into the joint. And as a result of that, you can have an inflammatory response. I mean, these crystals can get into the kidneys and other places as well. But I do testing around this. So I do stool testing to kind of look into if that bacteria is present in the gut, but also looking at whether oxalates are in somebody's urine, and that's going to give you an idea of whether this is an issue. I found one of my clients who had completely changed her diet. She was eating really healthy, and she said to me, "My joints have got even worse." So I was like, well, what are you eating? And she was eating sweet potato every day. She was like, I'm not eating white potato anymore. I'm eating sweet potato. And she did both of the tests that I offer, the GI effects and the stool test and the organic acids test, and we found raised oxalates, and we also found that she didn't have the gut bacteria to break them down. So she was going through the diagnosis process with arthritis, but they couldn't find anything wrong, but she was in masses of pain with her joints. And I agree, there is far more research to do, but in clinical practice, when I see this gut bacteria is missing, you have high oxalates, and you are having joint pain, but they can't find a reason for it, that is when I think, actually, let's go on a low oxalate diet for a while. Let's bring in some, citrate rich minerals, which can help bring down oxalates. Let's make sure we're cooking oxalates, because that can bring down the oxalates in oxalate rich foods. So that would be my approach in that scenario. And it's just, I'm so pleased that the research is going the way it's going. But when I'm seeing this in clinical practice, I'm just thinking, actually, let's just try this, let's deal with this, let's target this. And then you find that clients have results by just working on these underlying imbalances rather than focusing too much on the joints. I mean, there are definitely nutrients for your joint health, which are helpful as well. But I find by taking that approach, it can really help somebody find relief for the long term.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And how is she now?
Yeah, she's doing really well. She also actually did a food sensitivity test and found that her joint pain really improved after that. And I know there's a lot of debate around those tests as well and what they actually mean, but it was pretty unbelievable. So now we're not even really talking about her joint health anymore, because she's still. I normally work with clients over a 3-month period, and this is quite recent. She's talking more now about other symptoms like fatigue and because the joint problem has gone away.
That's
And it
amazing.
is remarkable. Yeah, it's remarkable when I see things like that. And that's not always the case, I'll be honest. But when it is the case, it's just like, wow, this is just brilliant. And then she's just looking at improving her health now and doing things. And hopefully, with the food intolerance, with the food sensitivities identified, we then reintroduce those as much as possible as we're healing the gut, because a lot of these sensitivities come from the gut being out of balance, and that causes the immune system to be out of balance.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so glad she's doing a lot better now. And yeah, I think everybody, listening to this, everybody has arthritis in different ways, and it can, be in us in different different joints. It can affect us with fatigue. It can affect our swelling, redness. There's loads of different symptoms that come with arthritis. And so, she might have one grade sort of the joint problems and joint pain, but then for someone else it might be a bit worse, or it might be just in one joint. Or so, everybody's story is different, is what I'm trying to say. But aside from that, what are the amazing anti-inflammatory foods and nutrients that we can take in, regardless of the level of arthritis that we have? It can all help with our inflammation. So what would you say are the key anti-inflammatory nutrients, or even supplements that you would recommend for people living with arthritis?
I think number one for me is always omega-3s, because I see it out of balance so often. And we get omega-3s from oily fish, but we also get them from some plant-based foods like walnuts, chia seeds, and flaxseed. And so that's normally, if I'm looking at somebody's diet, especially if they don't like fish or they're not eating fish, I'm thinking straight away about omega-3s, because omega-3s are essential, which means you have to get them from your diet. And also they set your cells into an anti-inflammatory mode. And the thing is, you need inflammation to help defend to defend your body against pathogens, bacteria, viruses. So it's not that we don't need that pro-inflammatory response, but we also need an anti-inflammatory response, especially when we're set in that kind of chronic inflammation cycle. And that's what omega-3s can do. It's all about the balance of omega-3s with omega-6s, which are more pro-inflammatory. And as I said, it's not that we don't need them. We just want them to be balanced with omega-3s. And because our diets just generally aren't rich in omega-3s, we need to be more conscious about when we're consuming them. But also vegetables. I mean, you can't ignore the fact that vegetables and the polyphenols in them are the most, they're anti-inflammatory, but also they feed our gut bacteria. So that has a knock-on effect as well. And a lot of people come to me and they are eating pretty good diets, but I think for most people, we need to be increasing the amount of vegetables and fruits that we're eating every day as much as possible. And there are lots of different ways that we can do that. I suggest your cookbook a lot to my clients, because it's got some amazing recipes in there and just full of vegetables and really nutrient dense. And I'll have some clients that come to me that are already eating that type of food, and we might enhance it with some like cranberry powder or blackcurrant powder, or there's some like moringa powders. There's some quite nice powders that you can add in. And I know you love matcha, and so do I. So there are ways that we can enhance that antioxidant effect as well. So, I get a lot of clients that will come to me and they're like, oh, can't eat that many vegetables. And by the end of the 3 months working together, they can't go without vegetables. And to be honest, that's where I am now. I feel strange when I haven't had many vegetables in my diet if I go away. So I'm constantly like trying to find like a green juice or ordering sides of vegetables with my meals. So yeah, vegetables are really important. But I think when it comes to nutrient density, what I find, because I did a half marathon recently, which is just unbelievable to me, because I would have never been able to do that before. And I probably didn't mention it, but I've struggled with joint problems since I was a teenager as well, with ganglions and really painful wrists, issues with my hip and knees. And I find that slow cooked meat really helps me. I've got an instant pot, so I can just throw my meat in. It doesn't get brown, so it doesn't get oxidized. Putting loads of vegetables with that. And when I was training, I was doing that 3 times a week, because certain people's genetics means that they need those active vitamins more, because they can't convert the vitamins that we get in fruits and vegetables. And so for me, I've done my genetic variations, which are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, normally called SNPs. And I know that I lack a lot of these genes that help convert those nutrients in vegetables to the active forms. So I found by having that, I had no joint problems. I was so surprised. I was just almost planning for it to have like a painful knee or something, because I was running long distance. So I found that by anti-inflammatories, making sure I've got my omega-3s in, and eating nutrient-dense food, I managed to get through it. And actually, I've signed up for another one, which is I'm just very excited to be doing it. So it can go a long way just through diet, and I didn't really do anything else.
Amazing. That's incredible that you've been able to do that and that you've booked for another one. That's fantastic. And I
Not
loved
from
what you I loved what you said about omega-3 as well, because that's something that I cannot live without. I take an omega-3 supplement every day, and I swear by it. So yeah, that's brilliant that you also mentioned that, and all that gut nourishing fiber as well, that keeps us happy, keeps our gut happy. But what about the things that don't keep our gut happy? What about the things that might aggravate that inflammation, or make us feel a bit lethargic, make us feel as if our joints will be hurting more, increasing that inflammation load? What are the sort of foods that you would recommend that people reduce down, avoid? Yeah.
I think one of the most obvious ones is sugar, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately, sugar it not only causes it when we eat sugar, it causes spikes in blood sugar, and it can, for some people, cause high blood sugar, which can be quite damaging to our vessels and other organs, and it can create inflammation as well. But on top of that, it feeds those harmful bacteria in the gut. So it goes back to the gut again, to be honest. And I find that if somebody's got a yeast growing in the gut, or a different type of bacterial overgrowth, they'll eat sugar and it can affect their guts. It can then cause that, that leaky gut syndrome, because leaky gut syndrome isn't a place that it's not a syndrome which you have constantly. It can be affected by different things. So, for example, if you ate a lot of sugar, that could cause those junctions to open more. And then that means that you've got that overgrowth bacteria, something that's going into the bloodstream, and you have a flare. So that's the mechanism that I see through sugar. But then there's also kind of ultra processed foods. I mean, there's been a lot of media around it, which is good, because if you look at the ingredients in some foods, there's chemicals in them, there's oxidized fats in them. All these things are extremely inflammatory, and the less ingredients in a product, the better. And you have to be mindful not just of the sugar content, and as a rule of thumb, I normally would look for like 5 grams per 100 grams at the absolute most in any product that I'm buying, but also look at the ingredient list. And if the things that you don't recognize, it might not be a good idea to be consuming it. And I would say that, with the nut milks and other things on the market, you can find versions of these which are much purer. And if you can get to 5 ingredients or below, then that again is a bit of a rule of thumb for me. And there might be other things. There might be some things you eat and you feel fine and you enjoy it, and don't worry about it. But generally, 80% of the time, that's what I'd be looking at. And then for some people, they may have certain food sensitivities. Again, there is more research coming out around that. I know with rheumatoid arthritis, there is a mechanism called agglutination, which can be caused by gluten and lectins. And they have found that can increase rheumatoid factor in the blood. But again, there's a lot more information needed. And what I wouldn't say is just because it's working for one person, it's going to work for you. So it's just always something that I'm bearing in mind when I'm working with a client. But I tend not to do hugely restrictive diets. I just take out the ultra processed foods, take out the sugar, and then look for specific food sensitivities that might be an issue for them personally. And it's not always the case. It can be that their food is lacking in nutrients. And just be mindful of beige food. You can enjoy it. Sometimes it has fiber in it. For the most part, it doesn't have any nutrients in it other than fiber. And I'm saying beige. I mean, white is just going back to that sugar comment that I made. White carbohydrates often turn into sugar very quickly, and they can cause the same issue as sugar. But even kind of more of the bulky carbs, so they are, some of them are really important for fiber, like wild rice, buckwheat, quinoa. I love all of those. But some of the other foods, you might enjoy them and that's fine, but don't think that you're getting a lot of nutrients out of them. I personally now don't really see them as a meal. I just see if I'm eating something like that, it's just for enjoyment alone. And I'll make sure I get all my other nutrients from other foods.
Yeah.
So they're really the main ones to kind of watch for. I mean, the more that you are cooking from scratch, and I know that's not easy for everybody. You can bulk cook as well. I know you've got some meal plans in your book, which is a really good guide, and eating leftovers and that type of thing to make it easy. But gradually, I've found I've still got a very demanding life in all the best ways, but I find time to be able to still eat a lot of my food from scratch. And I did when I was working in corporates as well. It just takes a bit of planning. But have planning time, put on a podcast, put on some music, enjoy it. So yeah, they're the main ones really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, definitely take that time for yourself and plan it in. And the initial sort of planning is the most annoying part. But then once you've got that time scheduled in, you've got your food in the fridge, you can just, like you said, put a podcast on and cook and batch cook as well. Freeze some, put some in the fridge, things like that. Yeah. What about alcohol? Because we've just talked about food, but what about drinks? Is alcohol something that triggers some of your clients? Or I know for me, it definitely does. Certain types definitely do. But yeah, is that something that you come across in your practice?
Yeah, so with alcohol, I mean, if you're drinking a moderate amount and you don't find that it is affecting you, um, you might be okay. But the truth is, it is when you drink alcohol, it does lead to increased intestinal permeability. So that state of leaky gut syndrome. So it means, again, you drink it, it's a bit like how I was explaining with sugar. You drink it, you suddenly have, whatever bacteria. And a lot of these unhelpful bacteria that are in the gut will feed from that as well. And then it's just putting a load on your liver. And if you have a chronic illness, your liver's probably overloaded anyway because you're inflamed and there's probably other things going on in your body, which is why you have these symptoms. And then you're kind of overloading it with alcohol. And it's a lot to do with genetics as well and how well you process alcohol. Some people won't process it as well as others. I certainly don't process it very well. And I know why, because I've done it's not all about genetics, but it's quite helpful to have that insight. But, I've got detoxes in two phases. And if you have a slow phase one detox, a fast phase one detox and a slow phase two, it means you get these buildup of metabolites in the middle, which are actually more toxic than the alcohol itself. So when people get drunk very quickly, it's often that they have a fast stage one and a slow stage two. So just some people just don't have the tolerance for it as well. So it's never going to be the best choice. If you enjoy it and, it's part of you socializing, you have a couple of glasses of red wine or you like going, and having it in that way, then, a couple of glasses of wine a week probably isn't an issue. If you're binge drinking, it's never going to be helpful. Anytime you're feeling like you're hungover, it's affected your body and caused inflammation. So, if you are happy not drinking, then that's going to be the best position for anybody. But obviously, a bit of moderate drinking probably isn't going to be the worst thing. And you can just live by that kind of 80% rule, and that can be part of your 20%. But it just depends on other factors as well. If you're eating low sugar, you're eating plenty of vegetables, you're working on all those other aspects, you can probably manage it a bit better. But yeah, I would say low alcohol, and then thinking about the types of alcohol you're drinking. Something like red wine probably has some benefits to it, but it is still a toxin.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think with alcohol, things are getting better in terms of alcohol free options and things that you can drink at the pub or a wine bar or at the dinner table or a restaurant. There's lots of alcohol free options now, and people are kind of more open to you not drinking. I know when I first started on some of my medications I was around 22 years old at uni, and there's an expectation that I should drink, and I think that things are changing in a good way, so there's less of a pressure to have that alcohol should you want to have a night off for your health, which is perfectly okay.
Completely agree. And yeah, when I started doing kind of alcohol free stints, I was having to explain myself all the time, and now just people don't even ask. And I just find like a little bit of apple cider vinegar with sparkling water, or some kind of bitter with sparkling water. I mean, that I love that as a drink, and I'm obsessed with sparkling water. So I'm just happy in a nice glass of some sparkling water, to be honest. And I go to music gigs. Because at first I didn't socialize as much because of it, and now when I'm not drinking, I do everything I would normally do, and I actually enjoy it more. I prefer going and watching music now without alcohol, because you kind of more present and more part of it. And even go for meals and things. I'm going for a meal to spend time with my friends and family and eat delicious food, not to drink. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite life changing as well when you start doing it and start enjoying it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think all of these things are a lifestyle change, aren't they? It's not just changing your diet, it's the overall picture, and making sure that, you're thinking about every single element. That 80/20 is not just, your food, it's what you're drinking, it's how you're sleeping, it's your exercise, it's all of those things. But we don't have time to go into all of them. So I have a couple more final questions for us before we round off the episode, VJ, if that's all right. So one of my other
Of course.
questions was sort of how many people, and kind of how sort of a specific case study on arthritis that's happened, and you've kind of been astonished at someone you've worked with. Obviously, you've spoken about that lady who you've worked with recently, but obviously you've been working as a nutritionist for a number of years now. Is there someone that really sort of stands out to you, where you thought, oh my goodness, they've come to me, they're in a really bad way, and I don't know if they're going to get better, and then they do. I'd love to hear a story. I know I've kind of put you on the spot, so we can come back to that one if
Always a client that stands out to me because he came to me in masses of pain, and he'd been a golfer, he was a successful businessman, and he had rheumatoid arthritis, and he was taking medication for it when we first met. And he had he was fairly healthy to a certain extent, and he did a lot of sport beforehand. And when he came to me, I remember he yeah, we did it. We did some stool testing, but also he came to me, and but even before that, I did a meal plan and a diet plan for him, and it was quite a switch to healthy, anti-inflammatory foods, nutrient dense foods. And I remember him looking at the plan and said to me, well, "When can I start to eat normally again?" And I said, "What is normally to you?" Because this is normal to me. And he just went, "Well, when can I start eating like my chocolate bars again?" So I was just like, "Let's just wait and see how you do." And within a month, and I'm giving you examples of people where I see big changes quickly. It's not always the case, but within a month, we had another meeting, and he was a changed man, and he'd lost weight as well. And he didn't need to lose masses of weight or anything, but his skin looked better. He just looked sharper, and he just said, "It's just phenomenal. I cannot believe the change." And he was still on his medication at that point. And then we did some work around his gut health as well. And he had a couple of other symptoms that were niggling at him. So we worked on those. And then after the 3 months, we stopped working together. And the reason I always remember him is he basically recommended me to everybody. So at the golf club he worked at, I ended up working with a lot of people from that golf club, and some of his family members. And he just said this was the best experience, and it was like life changing. And he was completely symptom free, but he was still taking the medication. And he actually lives quite close to where I live. And last year I was just pulling up and putting some fuel in my car, and this guy walked over because I'd only seen him on Zoom, and it was my client, and he just said to me, absolutely life changing. I'm medication free now as well. And I couldn't believe it. And I ended up saying to him, "Let's go for a coffee." And we went for a coffee because I don't know, I just felt so good for him. So that he always stands out to me. But there've been similar experiences, but just the fact that, and that's really the length of time it takes as well. At 3 months he was symptom free, feeling loads better, but he hadn't felt the confidence to talk to his doctor yet about the medication. And he did talk to his doctor, and I always recommend with anybody when it comes to medication, speak to the doctor and do it properly. And he did do it properly. But, you know, I'm working with some of his family members now. And as I said, he recommended me to a lot of his friends. I mean, this was a while ago when we were working together, and it was recent. Well, it's about a year ago that I saw him when I was filling my car up with fuel. But yeah, it was just, it's just amazing when you see that it doesn't just impact people's health, it impacts their life as well and how they're feeling. And yeah, there was just such a shift in him, not just the pain and the arthritis, but in other areas as well. So yeah, that was one of my big wins, and you know, it happened quite quickly as well, which was exciting.
That is such an amazing story, and it's a testament to you that he, you know, went off and told everybody about you. That's absolutely amazing. I absolutely love that. And you know, it's having that patience, isn't it, as well, because I think we're in that culture now where we get social media so quickly online, you know, watching videos one after the other. We can order something from Amazon and it comes the next day. You know, we're in a culture where things happen so fast. But I think with things like this, you have to remember to give it time and be patient. You know, he's like, how, you know, with the chocolate bar, I thought that was brilliant. You know, how long till I can have my chocolate bars? You know, you've got to be patient, and 3 months is the real kind of test, and kind of you've got to just give it that time. Even with medications, you know, people will say to you, you know, you try it for 3 months and see how you get on. You know, you've got to give the same to your nutrition and your health. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. That was absolutely wonderful. I'd love to round off the episode with one takeaway or tool for my listeners. So what's that one thing that after listening to this episode, they really should take away from this interview with you, VJ?
Well, when it comes to a takeaway about your health, if you have arthritis, certainly be thinking about your gut health. Notice any symptoms, observe how you're feeling after eating, observe if you've got bloating, pain, discomfort, because that might be a factor in your arthritis symptoms. And when it comes from a diet perspective, have a look at your diet and think about omega-3s, because that's what I see lacking the most. And if you don't like fish, find other ways to start incorporating it in your diet, because as I said, it's an essential nutrient. You need to be consuming it in your diet, because you won't get it from anywhere else and your body can't make it. So yeah, that would be my nutrition tip. But have a think about your gut health as well, and whether that is one of the underlying factors in your symptoms, because there is things that you can do to help with that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, VJ. And where can people find you? So if they want to follow you on Instagram, if they want to have a meeting with you, to discovery call, anything like that, where can people find you?
So my Instagram account is at the Autoimmune Nutritionist. So you can find me over there. I also have a podcast, the Autoimmune Reset, where I'm sharing lots of information about autoimmune conditions and nutrition. And you can also go to my website, which is where all my free resources are, which is www.theautoimmunenutritionist.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, VJ. It's been absolutely delightful, and hopefully we'll have you on again sometime.
Oh, great. Thanks, Emily. Thanks so much for having me.
Take care. Thank you. Bye. You've been listening to the Live Well with Arthritis podcast. If you're enjoying it, please follow and leave a review. I'd really love to hear from you. To sign up to the waitlist for the Live Well with Arthritis course, head to livewellwitharthritis.com/waitlist. For any questions or to suggest topics, email us over on hello@livewellwitharthritis.com. You can follow me over on @arthritisfoodie, that's ARTHRITISFOODIE. And you can also follow Live Well with Arthritis on @livewellwitharthritis to stay tuned for the latest updates, news, podcast episodes, recipes, and a whole lot more. I'll see you there. Until next time, live well and lots of love from me to you. P.S. Before you go, I have to let you know that this podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your medical professional, whether that be your rheumatologist, GP, specialist, or other qualified professional. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.